In this video, what we attempt to do is to give you an overview of the Indian economy, the current growth pace, the prospects for the future, what are the inherent strengths of the Indian economy as we see it, what are the challenges that we face, and what are the prospects for the future. In the beginning, let's look at some of the macro indicators, the big picture, as it were, of the Indian economy. India is a country with an area of 3.3 million square kilometers, having a population which is currently estimated at 142 crore, yielding a population density of 430 per square kilometer. Strictly, this is not part of the economic macro indicators, but then to my mind, this is an important figure to be remembered because land is a factor of production like labor and capital. So we should always remember when we discuss the strengths of the Indian economy, the prospects of this imbalance that we face vis-a-vis other countries, where we have 17% roughly of the global population subsisting on 2.4% of the global landmass. You can well imagine the pressure on resources, not merely on land, other resources like fuels, water, and all other resources that we need, whether it is for economic growth or even for maintaining a certain standard of living. This creates a unique pressure on resources. At the same time, we also currently have a situation where the average age of India is 28, the country with the largest youth population in the world, and also proportionately higher than even China. And the GDP, the gross domestic product, which is the output value of the economic activities taking place in the country, estimated at 302 lakh crore or $3.65 trillion as at the end of 2023, country growing at a rate of above 7%, the fastest growing large economy in the world. GDP per capita, which is a function of the population, is 2,12,000 at current prices, $2,550 going by current exchange rate. And here we should remember that this is a challenge that we face, that given our population, even though we have been growing at about 7% over the last 3 years, and the growth prospects look bright, the per capita GDP is comparable with some of our smaller neighbors like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and there is a long way to go as far as per capita national income of India is concerned. We have reached a stage where we are currently the 5th largest economy in the world, and this is where the conversation shifts to the achievements that we have recorded over the last several years and the major strengths that we can build upon. One of the major achievements, without doubt, is a populous country achieving self-sufficiency in food grains. Without doubt, we all recall times about 50 years ago when India was dependent on imported food grains and it was leading a ship-to-mouth existence. From those years, the country has traveled far thanks to the Green Revolution, the White Revolution, and other policy changes that we have seen. Today we have food grains output estimated at about 330 million tons per annum. Along with that, we are the largest producer of milk in the world, the second largest producer of sugar, and so on. So that's a major achievement. Concurrently, we should also be proud of the fact that as the national income has grown, poverty levels have come down, a major achievement without doubt. And as per the last estimate of the Niti Aayog, using the multi-dimensional poverty index, the latest count of people who are multi-dimensionally poor in India is estimated at about 11%. About 25 crore people, it is said, have moved out from below the poverty line measured on the basis of the multi-dimensional poverty index in the last 10 years or so. And we have been able to lift so many people out of poverty. The increase in the per capita income, which we saw in the last slide, in comparison with the per capita income, say about 10 or 15 years ago, is another proof of the general improvement in the income levels and also confirmation of people moving out of poverty. Along with that, we can also claim credit for having a low current account deficit. The gap between imports and exports, including remittances and capital inflows, not the transactions on the capital account, but capital inflows like the FDI, foreign portfolio investments, all put together, have given us a current account deficit which is just 1% at last count of our GDP. It is believed generally that a current account deficit of up to 2.5 or 3% is something which any country can live with. Foreign exchange reserves, another major area of strength, is currently $620 billion. We have the fourth largest amount of foreign exchange reserves in the world after China, Japan, and Switzerland. India is the country with the largest foreign exchange reserves. This gives us the strength to cope with stress on the foreign exchange front. This amount, mind you, is enough to pay for about 10 months of our imports, even if we don't earn anything from our exports. So this is an indicator of a country's strength. Largest recipient of inward remittances, overtaking Philippines, Mexico, China, India has moved to the top position in the world. Last count, we received in 2023 an estimated $125 billion of remittances from non-resident Indians and other remittances included. We also have a startup ecosystem, which is the third largest in the world. And these are positives, achievements, which we can indeed be proud of. If you look at the society and the economy, we have to also remember that even as we count our blessings, even as we take pride in our strengths, there are certain weaknesses or challenges which we have to address. And the attempt, therefore, is to list some of the major socio-economic strengths, if you will, that we have. We have democracy. Uniquely among the developing nations, India must be the only example of a large developing country which has stuck to the path of democracy over its last 75 plus years of independence, except for a short period during the emergency which was declared in 1975 and which was lifted in 77. India's track record has continued to be moored in democratic principles, which is a defining character of our socio-economic status. We have diversity, which is again a strength that India is known to be a subcontinent of various communities, castes, religions, people who don't practice any religion, and races. This diversity has managed to hold together over all these years, which is a major strength. It has not led to fissiparous tendencies, and it has not led to, thankfully, any tensions, major tensions at least, and that is a strength. We also have had political stability, irrespective of the color of the government that has ruled this country. We go through a democratic process, we elect our governments, and that is indicative of political stability, which is a major economic strength. And we also have, if you look at one more factor from the economic macros, we have low external debt. People don't realize, in comparison with what is happening or what has happened in countries like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, or Argentina. One of the major problems that developing countries have faced is the dependence on debt denominated in foreign currency. There we are well placed that the union government's liabilities in foreign currency is just 5% of the total liabilities. If our union government's total debt is 100 rupees, only 5 rupees is denominated in foreign currency. But coming to the problems, low per capita income is a problem, as I mentioned. There is need to increase our per capita income in order to catch up with countries which are ahead of us. We also have poverty. Even as we speak about 11% of people only being poor as per the multi-dimensional poverty index, we have to remember that our country is providing ration, free ration, under the PM Garib Kalyan Yojana scheme to 82 crore people. This should provide us some food for thought that if indeed we have managed to pull so many people out of poverty, then how come that we have 82 crore people being found eligible for free rations? This is not a critical comment on any figure at all. I just want you to think that there are issues of poverty which need to be tackled and which is being tackled at the government's level. But the problem of poverty, the problem of low per capita income is indeed a matter to be dealt with. Unemployment. We have estimates of unemployment put out by the government, put out by private agencies like the CMI, and jobs are being created. Employment opportunities are increasing both in the formal sector and in the informal sector because growth is happening in the overall economy. As I mentioned, about 7 to 8% growth will definitely yield to improvement in job opportunities. But then we also have the situation of the active cards under Manrega, which is a job guarantee scheme in the rural areas. There are 14 crore active job card holders who are looking for employment at minimum wages under the Rural Employment Guarantee Act, the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. The other challenges, because we have to address the problems of low per capita income and also jobs. We need money for social welfare, money for Ayushman Bharat, the scheme which has been announced by the government, money for cash benefit transfers to farmers, including small and marginal farmers, subsidies which sustain our agricultural sector, including the fertilizer subsidy, subsidies for people, for instance, for providing free gas connections under the PM Ujjwala scheme, which are all welfare schemes, well thought out and indeed required for a country which is at a stage of development where a push needs to be given for those who are near the margin or below the margin to enable them to move forward in the value chain or in the economic journey, as it were. So what then is the way forward? We have tremendous scope for boosting domestic demand. That is one key thing which we should understand, that when we think of India's future, the greatest strength lies in our numbers. The strength lies in the soundness of the macroeconomic indicators which I mentioned to you. But the strength also lies in the fact that if you look at the GDP contribution, the components contributing to the GDP from the expenditure side, private final consumption expenditure, which is actually a proxy for domestic demand, that is contributing 60% of GDP. Private final consumption expenditure, public final consumption expenditure, plus investments, plus net of exports and imports is what makes the GDP. And there, the component or the percentage of private final consumption expenditure being 60% gives us opportunity to move forward just by concentrating on the demand in the domestic sector, inside the country, catering to the demand of our people, because we have huge numbers. We have a young population. They need, they have demand for goods like air conditioners, television sets, automobiles, cars, and all the items of expenditure consumption that you can think of in the normal course. There are crores of people living in this country who are yet to acquire these goods, and therefore there is a demand potential which is available, which is one of the major strengths. And we have the ability, it has been accepted by international rating agencies also, that we will become the third largest economy in terms of the GDP by 2028, thanks in the main to this great domestic demand, which is unmet and which is attempted to be met by the economic agents working inside the economy. In that context, we also have to remember that the issue of debt and fiscal deficit is an important matter to be pondered over, because the impulse or the momentum for further growth will have to come from government spending in the infrastructure sector, because infrastructure like roads, railway networks, ports, airports, etc., the major investment has to be front-ended by the government or the public sector, and that can only happen through debt funding. This is what the example of other countries teaches. And in that context, deficit financing is an option which we have been exercising, and we have had deficits in the union budget of 5.9%, which was estimated for 23-24, against which we brought down the deficit to 5.8 as per the Union Finance Minister's budget, which was announced a day ago. And we are estimated to reach a level of deficit which is at 5.1%. Please remember that we had deficits of 6.7% the last couple of years. And further, during the period of COVID, we had even reached a level of fiscal deficit of above 9%. International rating agencies have been harping on the need for India to contain the fiscal deficit, and last count, our rating has been Baa3 by Moody's, BBB minus by S&P, and one of the compulsions which forces policy making in India is the apprehension that rating agencies might downgrade India if fiscal deficit is not constrained or brought down, even as the extent of debt which is constituted by fiscal deficit through government borrowing, as I told you, is denominated in Indian rupee, and only 5% of total debt of the government is denominated in foreign currency. This is a complex challenge which our country has to grapple with, that the foreign rating agencies want us to reduce our fiscal deficit. But if we constrain ourselves too much on the debt or the deficit side, we may not have enough of funds for infrastructure financing. And there, I would like you to think about this. The debt to GDP ratio of India is 97%, China is 297%, and the US is 218%. I would like you to think that if we are going to become the third largest economy by 2028, and if the other two countries ahead of us have funded their way to growth, as it were, through a debt-propelled path, we need to be thinking of what will be the path that we will follow in future in order to catch up with them, because we have to achieve GDP growth at a fast clip. We come to the last slide. So we are at a situation where we have to play catch up the two larger economies ahead of us, China and the US. We have to, of course, be focused on inclusive growth. Growth not for the sake of growth alone, but which will include people in our journey forward, the people at the margins, people below the poverty line. So growth with equitable distribution of the wealth is an imperative. Inequalities have to be addressed. The savings investment gap, which is related to the fiscal deficit. If we have a gap between the savings of the domestic savings of the economy and the investments which are required to keep the growth momentum going, there will be a gap. How do we fund this gap? How do we bridge it is a challenge. There are no ready answers, but I would like you to think and formulate your own views about it. That is a challenge which we have to grapple with. Manufacturing excellence. Unfortunately, there are very few commodities which are manufactured in India and which are renowned the world over for their excellence of quality. Whether it is automobiles, whether it is TV sets, refrigerators, air conditioners, I think it is the foreign brands, the engine of automobiles. Even now, I think it is either the Japanese engine, the Korean engine, or an engine which is designed in Germany or the US, which are accepted and well-known brands in the market. We have the Tatas, of course, I'm not forgetting that. But then you take another commodity like the television sets. Most of the television sets that people buy are Korean or Japanese brands. Personally, even the blade cartridges that we buy, Gillette, which is a US brand, you will be surprised to find that the manufacture of those cartridges, leave aside the branding, even the manufacture of those cartridges which you can see in your nearby shops, retail outlets, is often in Vietnam or Germany or in some other country. So we have to capture our rightful place as a center of manufacturing excellence. Our Atmanirbharata and Make in India schemes or missions or the emphasis is, I think, tailored to address this problem, that how can we make Made in India as a brand. So the key thing is, how do we weave in the manufacturing excellence journey, the inclusive growth journey, to be also job creating, because you can have growth without creation of jobs. Jobs we need because we are a young country. It is estimated that about 10 lakh people join the workforce every month looking for jobs. So that is a challenge. That will probably lead to the need for improving the quality of education. Are we able to skill our people to be fit for jobs, white collar jobs, IT related jobs? Are our graduates who are coming from the universities ready to be absorbed into jobs which need some skilling? Are we providing education which will make them entrepreneurs also, which will promote entrepreneurship, which will promote self-employment? And at the same time, the bottom line has to be a growth agenda or a growth path which will focus on, as the Prime Minister has recently said, which will focus on the poor. There are still millions of people who need to be lifted out of poverty, Yuva or the youth, because the nation is young, the nation has that energy, but we have to fulfill the aspirations of the youth. How do we do that? Farmers, we are self-sufficient, but the lot of the farmers, their income levels, of course, need improvement. They have to be a focus of policy initiatives. And how do we harness women power? These are some of the ideas which I believe you can also think and develop, even as you conceptualize ways and means by which we fashion what needs to be an Indian or Bharatiya model of growth or model of development, tailored to address our own unique problems without looking too much for either the capitalist model, which is a Western model, or even the communist socialist model, which has proved to be largely a failure at the global level. That is the challenge, and I believe that the nation is on a growth path. The outlook is positive. We need to be optimistic, and the challenges, if addressed in a uniquely Indian way, with due regard to our own specific problems, we shall be able to come to the status of a developed country, a Vikasit Bharat, which has been a goal announced by the Prime Minister in another 25 years' time. Thank you.